Howdy, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Connor Jones, and I am your host. This is Untold Tales from This Side of Nowhere. On this podcast, I share stories about growing up just about as close as you can get to the middle of nowhere, that is, in Poverty Flats, Wyoming, a little town that has more cows than people. Before we get started, I'd like to share with you about our sponsors. Today, the show is sponsored by Basin Pharmacy. Basin Pharmacy in Basin, Wyoming is your hometown pharmacy, as well as your source for over-the-counter medicine, vitamins, and supplements. They also carry office supplies, Russell Stover chocolates, and greeting cards. The friendly folks at Basin Pharmacy are happy to help with any of your medicinal needs, whether you have a prescription to fill or a question about your meds. You can stop in Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Saturdays from 9 a.m. to noon. We're also sponsored by the Wyoming Welcome Program. The Wyoming Welcome Program distributes baskets with welcome brochures and promotions from local businesses to new move-ins to Park County, and they distribute brochures to restaurant tables in Cody and Powell that have jokes, fun facts, and the month's holidays, along with advertisements from local businesses. So if you would like to participate in either of Wyoming Welcome's programs, please contact them at Haley J, that's HALEYJ, at wyomingwelcome.com. Just send her an email and she's happy to help out with your advertising needs. And now, the podcast. Even as I record right now, I can hear some birds going crazy outside. They are very much aware of the fact that spring is here and my grass is getting green. Farmers are burning things left and right, and everybody is excited at the prospect of winter's end. It's a fun time in northwestern Wyoming, and it means people are getting back outside. Haley and the boys went for like 3 walks yesterday, and we're all getting our sunburns on, so it's a good time of year. Today's story has to do with what happens when people are starting to get outside again, and that is taking a trip. Maybe not in the sense that you're thinking of, though. You'll see. Today's story is called Trip Insurance. Every time I moved, pain shot through my leg, and the uncomfortable waiting room chair squeaked like my weight was killing it. In an effort to distract myself from the pain, I browsed the selection of magazines on the table beside me and discovered a publication devoted to fly fishing. Being an avid fly fisherman myself, I picked up the magazine and began perusing its pages. It was only a few articles in that I came upon a full-page ad for Rancho de las Truchas, an all-inclusive fly fishing resort in majestic Patagonia. The smiling angler in the photo was holding a massive brown trout beside a breathtaking river that coursed through a pristine mountain landscape. "Look at this, dear," I said, holding up the magazine so my wife Lily could see the picture. "Want to go on a fishing trip in Patagonia?" "You get into enough trouble fishing in Wyoming," she replied. "Who knows what could happen in South America? Besides, I bet it costs a fortune to go fishing down there." The wind having been effectively removed from my sails, I lowered the magazine and heaved a sigh. Lily was probably right. A quick Google search on my phone revealed that flights to Patagonia cost a measly $1,800. I've driven vehicles that cost less. "Well, getting there is pretty expensive," I mused. "Mm-hmm," Lily nodded, flipping a page in Better Homes and Gardens magazine. But I bet things are cheaper once you're there. It's South America, right? I searched up Patagonia fishing trips. Holy smokes! I couldn't contain a yelp when I saw the price tag on some of the guided trips. Al, Lily hissed. Keep it down. Let's just skip the hospital and deliver our next child at home, I said. Having a kid and going on a trip to Patagonia cost about the same. If we're going to do a home birth, you're the one giving birth next time, Lily smiled. Well, that's probably not an option, I sighed, gazing longingly at the ad in the magazine once more. But wouldn't it be amazing? Fishing in Patagonia. My voice trailed off as my mind soared to parts unknown, fishing rod in tow. Not gonna happen, Lily declared. Okay, I said sadly, and flicked to another page in the magazine. Next to a story about a conservation project in Walla Walla, Washington, I saw yet another advertisement trumpeting an announcement for trip insurance for the outdoors. Intrigued, I kept on reading. Planning a dream fishing or hunting trip? Ensure your peace of mind and your bottom line with trip insurance for the outdoors. The trip of a lifetime can be pricey, and you'll want to protect your investment. Call one of our agents today for a free consultation. Below the main body of the ad, the business slogan was written in fancy lettering. For any kind of trip, we've got you covered. Not the catchiest tagline, I mused, fishing in my pocket for my phone. I glanced back at the phone number listed in the magazine, which I held in one hand as I dialed with the other. The call connected on the third ring. Hello, an automated voice said cheerily. Thank you for calling Acme Trip Insurance. For any kind of trip, we've got you covered. This call may be recorded for quality control purposes. For domestic trips, press 1. For international trips, press 2. For group trips, press 3. For outdoor trips, press 4. I punched the number 4 with my thumb. Ever notice how hard it can be to hit buttons on the far side of the phone when you're holding it with one hand? It rang a couple more times, and then a man's voice on the other end said, Hello, thank you for calling Acme Trip Insurance. My name is Jared. With whom do I have the pleasure of speaking? I quickly replied, My name is Al Jones. Fantastic, Mr. Jones, the man trilled. Are you calling about an exclusive offer on trip insurance? Yeah, I guess, I said. I saw your ad in a magazine and I was curious. Of course. Could there be a major trip in your future? Jared asked. Well, possibly, I replied, shifting uncomfortably in my seat and immediately regretting it. Lily was giving me an odd look over the top of her magazine. It's the trip insurance company, I mouthed to her. She raised her eyebrows in response. You guys insure a lot of trips, I said into the phone. I didn't think we'd ever get to the outdoor option when I was listening to the menu. Haha, yes, you're quite right. You never know when you're going to take a spill, Mr. Jones. Yeah, I guess so, I said. You do both domestic and international trips? Yes, Jared said. The domestic trips tend to be less spendy, though that depends on where you go. For instance, trips in the Midwest generally don't involve falling quite as far as a trip in, say, Alaska. We charge extra if you plan to be mountain climbing, as those trips can result in a significant injury. I grunted. You seem to be an expert in trips, I said. Jared chuckled appreciatively. What he didn't know is that I was something of a trip aficionado myself, and I had extensive experience. Well, Mr. Jones, I am in the business of trip insurance. You can never be too well informed or too careful. What was your most recent trip? I imagine you've taken a few. Yes, I conceded. I've taken my fair share. There was one time I tripped over a crack in a sidewalk. I skinned up my hands pretty good and rearranged my facial features. My friends say it was an improvement, I joked. I see, Jared said. Too bad you weren't covered under our commuting trip policy. It covers trips on sidewalk, asphalt, and other common paving materials, and it even covers trips on AstroTurf. Wow, that's quite the list, I said appreciatively. Yes, we're America's premier provider of trip insurance. I've covered all kinds of trips for all kinds of people. The menu even mentioned group trips, I said. Oh, yes, our group trip package is very affordable, Jared said. I once wrote a policy for a group of 5 friends that hiked the Appalachian Trail. On the second day, they took a trip down a waterfall that landed all 5 of them in the ER. I tell you, it takes some skill and planning to trip with 5 people at the same time. Jared laughed jovially, and I forced out a weak chuckle, then said, Say, what about a trip a little farther from home? Say, like, in South America. Oh, South American trips, Jared asked. Those can be pretty serious. I had a client who tripped on a walking tour to Machu Picchu. Fell down half the Andes. He only broke 6 bones, though, and his exclusive South American trip insurance covered 90% of his hospital bills. He would have been 100% covered, but the provider he saw down there wasn't in-network. It's important to verify before receiving treatment, you know. Sounds painful, I agreed. So you offer 100% coverage? Under certain policies, Jared said. Our basic policy covers up to 75% of hospital bills for injuries associated with a trip. The preferred option covers 85%, and the premier level of coverage will cover 100% of your trip-related expenses. I see, I said, rubbing my chin with my free hand, but stopped right away when I touched the part of my jaw that had banged on a boulder when I fell. I specialize in outdoor trips, of course, Jared said. Let me tell you, there have been some doozies. I bet, I agreed. In my mind, I reviewed some of the outdoor trips I had been on. There was the time I tripped over a rock while carrying an elk quarter and tenderized both myself and the meat rolling down a canyon side. Then there was the time my foot got caught on a branch while I was hiking along Caraway Creek, and I fell headfirst into the biggest fishing hole on the creek. Lucky for me, a submerged log stopped my progress downstream, and I was able to avoid being swept away by wrapping myself around it. My back has never been quite the same. So, how much does outdoor trip insurance set someone back? I asked. I'll be honest, the prices are somewhat higher than other kinds of trip insurance, Jared warned me. Little trips cost less to insure than big trips. I'm sure you understand. Sure, I nodded. What kind of trip are we talking here? Jared asked. Well, I've always dreamed of going to Patagonia to fish, I said. Absolutely, Jared said. Patagonia is beautiful this time of year. Unfortunately, there are all kinds of ways you could take a spill while you're down there, especially fishing. Yeah, I bet, I said. Do you just plan on fishing, or would you be hiking or hunting as well? Jared asked. Trips with loaded guns can often result in more costly injuries, if you know what I mean. I hadn't really thought about that, I mused. Is the hunting any good down there? There are many opportunities for hunting in Patagonia, Jared said animatedly. You can hunt red stags, fallow deer, black bucks, and more. Really? I said. I never really thought about big game in South America, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised they have it down there. Oh, yes, Jared said. Red stags are like the South American equivalent of elk, and they can even get bigger than their North American relatives. Geez, I thought. Is this guy a trip salesman too? I switched the phone to my other ear since it was starting to get uncomfortable holding it against the bandage Lily had wrapped around my head. Well, what would it cost to insure a trip with both hunting and fishing? I asked. Patagonia hunting and fishing trip, Jared said slowly, evidently searching for a price quote. After a brief pause, he chirped, Here it is. Our basic coverage runs at $850 with 75% coverage for all medical expenses. Preferred coverage is 85% and it runs at $1,000. And the premier policy is $1,200. I must have gasped audibly because Jared quickly added, The premier policy has a 0% $0 deductible, just so you know. I swallowed hard, then regretted doing so. My throat was still pretty sore from getting my fishing rod wrapped around it. Wow, I choked out. I'm sure you understand the risk involved in a trip such as the one you're considering, Jared said carefully. Both hunting and fishing, not to mention in a foreign country. That's quite the trip. He started to chuckle, but it wasn't very convincing. For an additional $150 per item, we'll insure fly fishing rods and firearms. I didn't care to mention my fly rod had cost me approximately the price to insure it. Realizing I was batting out of my league, I said, Thanks for the information. I'll definitely keep you guys in mind. No problem, Jared said. Are you planning any other trips? Like I said, we have a great domestic trip policy. It's very reasonable, and our network includes thousands of healthcare providers. Not at this time. Thank you very much for your help, I said. Well, if anything comes up, be sure to give us a call, Jared said. Thank you for considering Acme Trip Insurance. When I hung up, I couldn't help but notice Lily casting surreptitious glances my way over the top of her magazine. What? I asked. Oh, nothing, she said in that way wives do, the one where, oh, nothing speaks volumes in tacit disapproval. Don't worry, I grumbled. I'm not going to buy trip insurance. It costs almost as much as the trip to South America itself. I can't say I'm surprised, Lily mused, turning a page. Just then, someone entered the waiting room behind us. I turned to see my buddy Mark Crawfry hobbling toward me. His wife Jane supported him as he limped along, favoring his left leg. Mark, I said cheerfully. Al, he replied, his grin almost immediately replaced by a grimace of pain. Hello, Lily, Jane said. Hello, Jane, Lily replied. Jane guided Mark to the chair beside me, and Mark sank down and winced, leaving his leg extended in front of him. I'll get you checked in, Jane said warily and headed for the desk. Mark turned and surveyed my ripped jeans, bandaged head, and swollen eye. Fancy meeting you here, he said. Yeah, what brings you to the unurgent care today? I asked. Oh, I must be getting old. I fell off a ladder and landed wrong, I guess, Mark grunted. gesturing toward his leg. How about you? Oh, I said with an air of indifference. Just a little fishing trip. And there you have it. Another untold tale from this side of nowhere. Now, I was in the hospital waiting room recently. All 5 of us have gotten the flu or COVID or something. They tested Haley and it came back negative for flu, COVID, and RSV. So we're unsure of what we've had, but we've been sick for quite a while. I think I complained about it a little bit in the last podcast episode, so it's been at least 2 weeks. But while I was there, I was reading Trout Unlimited's magazine, and that's where I came up with the idea for this story. There was an ad about Patagonia fishing trips, but not actually an ad for trip insurance. So I hope you appreciated the running joke in this one. I was starting to write about fly fishing in Patagonia, and this story came out. So if you liked it, be sure to go ahead and comment or leave a positive review on your podcast platform of choice. If you'd like to help the podcast out, please find us on Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review. It will make the podcast easier to find and give me the opportunity to share it with more people. So, as always, this has been another untold tale from this side of nowhere, where we work twice as hard for half as much and still find time for the important things, like fishing. See you next time, folks.